but we have not talked about being on the brink of a historic settlement decision, according to Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports. That is what he said right here, his words, what he calls it. On the brink of a historic settlement decision, the NCAA is facing pushback from one of its most prestigious basketball conferences. Okay, so we're going to start with the part where G5 is not real happy with this. In an email Saturday to our members, Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman expressed strong objection to the NCAA's proposal on how it is determining back damages related to the consolidated settlement in the House, Hubbard, and Carter antitrust cases. So the back pay, the NIL back pay. She's seeking ways to alter the plan that the NCAA and A5 have orchestrated, she writes in the letter, a copy of which was obtained by Yahoo Sports. So good reporting here. Ross Dellinger obtains a letter where the Big East commissioner is pissed. That's the long and short of it. The settlement in the final stages of adoption consists of three main concepts. You guys know this if you've been following along here on the channel. Back damages owed to former athletes. That's the NIL back pay, and that's $2.77 billion. Revenue sharing moving forward so that they avoid lawsuits like that. That would be upwards of $22 million annually per school. And the overhaul of a variety of NCAA elements, including scholarship and roster limits, governance structure, and enforcement arm. Under the formula, the Big East will be responsible for about $5 million to $7 million annually, or as much as $70 million over the next decade, a figure that works out to about $600,000 to $700,000 per school per year. Based on the numbers we have reviewed, the liability of the 22 non-FBS conferences under the proposed formula appears disproportionately high, particularly because the primary beneficiaries of the NIL back pay amounts are expected to be FBS football players, Ackerman wrote. So the Big East, obviously, basketball conference, power conference in basketball, not in football. They're saying, look, most of this money is going to FBS football players. Why are we at the Big East worried about that? Why are we concerned about that at all? Quote, I have voiced the Big East's strong objections to the proposed damages framework through recent emails to NCAA President Charlie Baker and his counsel, and through comments during commissioner calls over the past 2 weeks. Okay, so they're not happy. They're not thrilled at all. There was another piece of this. In the Big East, okay, yeah, here's some better context on that. In the Big East, a reduction of $600,000 annually for a decade is a much higher percentage of a school's total budget. UConn, the only public school member of the Big East with an FBS football program, has a reported budget of $90 million. The school, which has won back-to-back national titles in basketball, is believed to be the highest grossing athletic department in the league by far, which makes total sense. That makes total sense. By the way, Power 5 schools are expecting to see a reduction of $1 to $2 million in distribution annually for 10 years, which would be about 2% of their budget. 2% of their budget. And there have been complaints here. Believe it was in the ESPN article, but there have been complaints from some of the G5s that it would take up to 25%. Instead of 2%, people are going all the way up to like, this may be 25% of what I've got here. Like, that kills me way more than it does these Power 5 schools, even though they will be paying $1 million or $2 million per year, and we would be paying $600,000 if you're the Big East or whatever. It's a sliding scale based on conference there. So that's their real issue. That is, and frankly, that's a big issue, and it's an understandable issue. It's just one that unfortunately, I don't know how they're going to get many people to really care about it too much. Because we don't care about the Big 12 or the ACC, right? Like, it just everybody looking down the food chain. Nobody is looking out for the greater good in college athletics here. I would not expect there to be a whole lot of sympathy for G5 schools. Well, perhaps there will be sympathy. I would not expect there to be a lot of action taken on behalf of whatever sympathy or empathy would be there in the case of those conferences. That also doesn't mean you shouldn't fight it. So I can definitely understand why we're seeing a fight here from the Big East commissioner, but I don't know that it's going to do a whole lot of good. It also is just like, you look at the future of this thing and where things are going, and it's like, man, you're continuing to hurt the smaller guys more and more with everything that happens, right? You're going to throw out there this 22 million thing with what you want to pay everybody moving forward. And Big 12 schools could say, well, hey, I mean, 22 million for us, that could be like 50% of what we're taking in, but it's only going to be 25% or 30% for a Big 10 or an SEC school. I am pulling these figures out of nowhere, like kind of a somewhat educated stab at that. But you get the point, right? The Big 12 and the ACC could look up and claim the same thing. Like, we're getting screwed too. Like, we feel for you, group of five. Like, we truly do. We have empathy. They can have empathy, right? They're again, Big 10 and the SEC, they can just have sympathy for everybody. I don't think that they do. I certainly don't think that Greg Sankey does. But the empathy piece of that is important. The Big 12 and the ACC could say we have empathy because we're getting screwed by what we're going to have to pay moving forward. If we're able to meet all of that, it's going to put us at a much greater disadvantage than it is the SEC or the Big 10, because they've got all this extra TV money and now they've rigged the college football playoff revenue distribution in their favor. So, like, we get it, we understand, but we can't really do much because we're taking these huge hits from up top. So we don't want to advocate for taking on more money out of what's going to be the House settlement, because then that will disproportionately hurt us in the Big 12 or the ACC more than it will hurt the Big 10 or the SEC. Now, the Big 10 or the SEC is not, I mean, they will not want to pay it in general, of course. They definitely won't want to pay it in general. But it doesn't matter as much to them, and they could even look down the line and be like, well, yeah, it'd be a little bit more money for us, but it's hurting those guys even more proportionally as all this goes. So you see how this all trickles down. So, like, feel bad, understood, probably not anything that's going to happen. And I think they sort of realize that. So Ackerman, who is the Big East commissioner, says, well, Ackerman and other non-FBS leaders plan to fight for a change in the formula. She is unclear how much time or leverage they have in such a battle with leading defendants in the case, being the high revenue football powers. Power conference leaders are planning to vote and in all likelihood adopt terms of the settlement in independent meetings of their board of presidents and chancellors this week. So again, circle that. This is the piece I was talking about earlier. This week. Talking about this week being the week that this all goes down. Decisions are expected starting as soon as Tuesday and running through Thursday. So be watching in the middle of the week. I mean, it could be a hell of a live show on Wednesday with that basically already being carved out. The NCAA Board of Governors plans to meet Thursday when they are expected to review and potentially authorize the settlement as well, according to Ackerman's letter. Big East leaders are expected to further discuss the matter Tuesday from their league meetings in Florida. College sports insiders describe this week as the most consequential in college sports history, as leaders not only approve the massive back pay terms, but also agree on a framework around a new model that will topple amateurism once and for all. So, I mean, there you go. Also, if you prefer a nice little Jim Phillips quote in the middle of all of this, quote, this is a seismic shift in college athletics. It's not a matter of if it is going to happen. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips said this week. Thank you, Ross, for getting us another Jim Phillips appearance here. I always love a good Jim Phillips appearance to remind us of all of the great work that he has done throughout this entire process.